You wake up each day with a quiet certainty that your actions belong to you. You choose when to get out of bed. You decide what to eat, where to go, what to say. This feeling of control is so deeply woven into experience that it feels almost insulting to question it. Of course you are choosing, of course your decisions come from you. What else could they come from? The sense of control does not announce itself loudly. It sits calmly in the background, shaping every moment. When you reach for a glass, you feel like the author of that movement. When you speak, it feels like the words originate inside you and then move outward. Life appears as a sequence of moments where you stand at the center, making choices, steering outcomes, nudging the future in one direction rather than another. This feeling is powerful because it feels immediate. You do not experience a gap between intention and action. You do not notice a delay where something else decides first. Thought and movement seem to belong together, as if one naturally causes the other. The decision appears, the action follows, and the story feels complete. Because of this, control feels personal. It feels tied to identity. You are not just a body reacting to the world. You are a self, a chooser, an agent. When something goes right, you take credit. When something goes wrong, you feel regret. Both pride and guilt depend on the same assumption that you could have done otherwise. Daily life reinforces this belief constantly. Society is built on it. Responsibility, praise, blame, and morality all assume that choice is real and originates inside the individual. Even language depends on it. I decided. I changed my mind. I chose this. These phrases feel descriptive, not philosophical, and nothing in ordinary experience contradicts them. When you pause before making a decision, it feels like a genuine fork in the road. You weigh options. You hesitate. You deliberate. The future seems open, waiting for you to push it one way or another. This hesitation feels like freedom itself. What makes this feeling so convincing is that it does not feel forced. No one has to teach you that you are in control. You feel it long before you can explain it. Children assert it instinctively. I want. I don't want. I chose. Control feels like a basic feature of consciousness, not a theory about it. Richard Feynman understood how dangerous this feeling could be, not because it is false in daily life, but because it feels complete. When something feels complete, curiosity shuts down. You stop asking how it works. You stop looking beneath it. Control becomes a given, not a question. But physics has a long history of showing that the most obvious feelings are often the least reliable guides to what is actually happening. Solidity feels obvious. Time feels obvious. Observation feels obvious. Each one collapses under closer inspection. The feeling of control may belong in the same category. The unsettling possibility is not that you lack control in some dramatic science fiction sense. It is subtler than that. It is the possibility that the feeling of choosing is not the mechanism of choice, but the experience that follows something else already in motion. At this stage, nothing seems wrong. Life still feels the same. You still feel in charge. That is exactly why this illusion is so stable. It does not need to deceive you actively. It only needs you to never look too closely at the moment where a decision actually begins. The question is not whether you feel in control. You clearly do. The question is whether that feeling is evidence of authorship or simply another carefully constructed experience, doing its job so well that it never asks to be examined. The feeling of control depends on a simple assumption that you decide first and then your body acts, thought appears, action follows. Cause, then effect. But when scientists began looking closely at how decisions actually form inside the brain, that timeline quietly collapsed. Long before you are aware of making a choice, measurable activity has already begun. Neural circuits shift, patterns emerge, signals rise and fall. By the time a decision reaches consciousness, the brain has already committed resources to one outcome over others. Awareness does not initiate the process. It arrives late, reading the result. This discovery feels offensive to intuition because it reverses the order you experience. You feel the intention appear, and then you move. But the feeling of intention is not the starting gun. It is the brain's announcement that a process already underway has reached a point stable enough to report from the inside. This delay is invisible. Consciousness is not shown drafts. It is shown conclusions. You never experience the competing impulses, the suppressed alternatives, the discarded possibilities. You experience the winning option as if it appeared fully formed, authored by you in that moment. This is why decisions feel sudden yet personal. The brain does not say, I have been working on this quietly for a while. It says, here is what you want. The result feels intentional because it is delivered as intention. Experiments that track brain activity reveal this gap again and again. The timing varies. The complexity varies. But the pattern remains. Neural commitment precedes conscious awareness. The brain prepares the action before the mind claims it. Choice as you experience it is more like a notification than a command. This does not mean you are a puppet. It means the part of you that feels like you is not where decisions originate. It is where they are explained. Consciousness is a narrator, not the engine. Feynman found this deeply unsettling, not because it stripped humans of dignity, but because it exposed how misleading introspection can be. You cannot feel the machinery that produces your thoughts. You only feel the thoughts once they are already shaped. The brain hides its work to keep experience smooth and usable. The illusion survives because it is functional. If you felt every competing impulse, every hesitation, every suppressed urge, action would slow to a crawl. Survival does not reward transparency. It rewards efficiency. So the brain edits aggressively, presenting a clean story of choice instead of a messy reality of process. This also explains why you often rationalize decisions after making them. You act first, then explain. The explanation feels honest because it is coherent. But coherence is not causation. The story arrives after the fact, convincing you that it was the reason all along. From this perspective, free will does not vanish. It changes shape. Choice is not a single moment where a self intervenes. It is a distributed process unfolding across time, layers, and influences you never experience directly. The unsettling part is not that decisions happen without you. It is that the you who feels in control is not where the deciding happens. Awareness is downstream. It receives outcomes, not raw causes. At first, this feels like a threat to responsibility and meaning, but nothing has actually been taken away yet. You still think, you still deliberate, you still feel conflict and hesitation. The difference is that these experiences are no longer treated as the origin of action, but as part of a larger system doing its work quietly beneath notice. The question now becomes unavoidable. If awareness is not where decisions begin, then what exactly is the feeling of choice for? Once you accept that decisions begin before awareness arrives, the idea of free will starts to change shape. It does not disappear. It transforms. What once felt like a mechanism, an internal lever you pull to make things happen, begins to look more like a story the brain tells to make sense of what has already occurred. Humans are storytelling organisms. We do not experience isolated events. We experience narratives. When something happens, the brain instinctively asks, why did this happen, and who caused it? The answer it prefers is simple and personal. I did this. I chose this. I decided. That answer creates coherence. It turns a stream of impulses into a self-free will. In this sense, is not the engine of action. It is the explanation of action after the fact. The brain cannot show you the full causal chain behind a decision. That chain is vast: genes, hormones, memories, mood, environment, timing, fatigue, social pressure, past reinforcement, and random neural fluctuations. All play a role. Presenting that complexity would be useless. So the brain compresses it into a single cause, me. This compression feels natural because it works. It allows learning, it allows accountability, it allows planning. The story of free will stitches actions into identity, creating the feeling of continuity across time. Without that story, experience would fragment into unrelated moments. But stories are not mechanisms. A story explains what happened in a way that feels meaningful. A mechanism describes what actually caused it. Confusing the two creates the illusion. Feynman was careful here. He never claimed that humans are meaningless automatons. He rejected that framing entirely. What he challenged was the idea that there is a special inner switch where choice originates, independent of physical law. Physics does not recognize such a switch. It recognizes interactions unfolding according to rules. When you say, I freely chose this, what you are really describing is the absence of felt coercion. You did not feel forced. No external constraint was obvious. That feeling is real, but it does not tell you how the decision formed. It only tells you how it felt to experience the outcome. The same illusion appears in touch, observation, and perception. Solidity feels like contact. but it is interaction. Observation feels passive, but it is participation. Free will feels like authorship, but it is narration. This is why free will resists scientific explanation. People are not defending a process. They are defending a story that feels central to identity. Questioning it feels like questioning personhood itself. Yet the story remains even after the mechanism is exposed. You still experience choice. You still deliberate. You still hesitate. Nothing in daily life breaks. The illusion persists because it is useful, not because it is true in a fundamental sense. From this view, free will becomes an interface. Like a graphical user interface on a computer, it hides complexity behind simple symbols. You click an icon instead of manipulating transistors. The interface is not false. It is just not what actually runs the system. The danger comes when the interface is mistaken for the hardware. When people insist that because choice feels free, it must be uncaused or outside physical law. Physics has no room for that exception. Everything that happens has causes, even if they are too complex to trace. Feynman embraced this discomfort. He accepted that the universe does not care about how agency feels. It operates through lawful behavior at every scale. Humans are not exempt from this simply because introspection feels convincing. At the same time, he rejected the idea that this reduces humans to nothing. A story can be powerful without being fundamental. Meaning does not require metaphysical freedom. It requires consistency, learning, and consequence. The story of free will provides those. The illusion only becomes a problem when it is treated as an explanation instead of a description. When I chose is mistaken for this is how the universe works. That leap is where confusion enters. Free will, then, is not a force pushing reality. It is a lens through which reality becomes livable. A narrative overlay that turns blind process into personal experience. You are not wrong to feel that you choose, but that feeling does not reveal the machinery. It reveals the story your brain must tell to keep the world intelligible, continuous, and human. The deeper question now is not whether free will exists, but why the universe would allow such a convincing story to exist at all. Richard Feynman never offered a comforting answer about free will, and that was deliberate. He distrusted answers that made people feel satisfied too quickly. To him, comfort was often a sign that something important had been skipped. When it came to choice, he refused both of the popular extremes. He rejected the idea that humans are magically free agents floating outside physical law. And he also rejected the idea that people are nothing more than simple machines with no meaning. This refusal made his position deeply uncomfortable. Feynman accepted that the universe operates according to consistent rules. Particles behave lawfully. Forces do not negotiate. Causes lead to effects. From that perspective, there is no obvious place to insert a special exemption called free will. If the atoms in your brain obey physics, then your thoughts must obey physics too. Anything else would be an appeal to mystery rather than explanation. But Feynman also understood that human experience cannot be dismissed. You do not live your life as a differential equation. You live it as a sequence of choices, regrets, intentions, and commitments. To deny that lived reality would be intellectually dishonest. So he held both truths at once, even though they pull in opposite directions. His position was not, free will is an illusion, therefore nothing matters. It was far more precise and far more unsettling. He believed that the universe may be fully lawful, even deterministic at some level, while still producing systems complex enough to experience themselves as choosing. The discomfort comes from accepting that both can be true without fully reconciling them. Feynman often warned against demanding a picture where none exists. People want a mental image of how free will fits into physics. They want to see the place where choice enters, but physics does not always offer pictures. Sometimes it offers rules that work without explaining why they feel the way they do. Choice, in Feynman's view, was not a ghost outside the machine. It was a description of what complex systems do when they interact with information, memory, and uncertainty. The mistake was treating that description as a fundamental cause rather than a higher-level pattern. He was also careful about the word determinism. People imagine it as fate, as inevitability, as a fixed future written in advance. Feynman did not think that way. Even if the laws are fixed, the outcomes are often unpredictable. Complexity explodes. Small differences amplify. In practice, no one knows what will happen next. This matters because predictability, not lawfulness, is what free will emotionally depends on. You feel free because you cannot see the future, not because the future lacks causes. Uncertainty creates the experience of openness, even in a lawful universe. Feynman found it dishonest to claim certainty where none exists. He admitted freely that physics does not yet know whether the universe is fully deterministic at the deepest level. Quantum mechanics complicates the picture. Probability enters. Outcomes are constrained but not specified. This uncertainty does not rescue naive free will, but it does prevent simple conclusions. What Feynman refused to do was pretend that science had solved the problem of choice. Anyone who claims to have a clean answer, he believed, is oversimplifying. Either they are smuggling in metaphysics, or they are ignoring experience. His discomfort was intentional. He believed that real understanding often feels incomplete. If an answer leaves no tension, it is probably wrong. The honest position is to admit what we know, admit what we do not, and resist the urge to resolve the gap with comforting stories. In this sense, Feynman's view on choice mirrors his view on reality itself. The universe does not owe you clarity, it only owes consistency. You are free to describe your actions as choices, and that description works at the human level. But the universe does not pause to ask whether that description feels meaningful. The uncomfortable truth is this: physics does not validate free will, and it does not erase it either. It simply does not care. Choice exists as a phenomenon inside experience, not as a fundamental ingredient of the cosmos. Feynman was willing to live with that tension. He saw it not as a failure of understanding, but as an honest reflection of where understanding currently ends. At this point, the fear usually surfaces. If free will is a story rather than a mechanism, if decisions form before awareness claims them, then what happens to responsibility, to meaning to you? It can feel as if something essential is about to collapse, as if removing authorship removes value. But that fear comes from misunderstanding what is actually being questioned. Responsibility does not depend on metaphysical freedom. It depends on causation within systems that can learn. You are still the system where actions originate, even if they do not originate where it feels like they do. Your brain, your history, your values, your habits, these are not external forces acting on you. They are you. Holding you responsible is not pretending you floated above physics. It is recognizing that consequences shape future behavior within the same system. Meaning works the same way. Meaning is not handed down by the universe. It emerges from patterns that persist. When something matters to you, it matters because of how it fits into your internal structure, your memories, goals, relationships, and expectations. None of that disappears just because choice is not metaphysically free. In fact, meaning becomes more grounded. It no longer depends on a mysterious inner power. It depends on how experiences change you over time. The illusion of free will made meaning feel fragile, as if it had to be protected by exemption from law. Feynman's view quietly removes that burden. Meaning does not need protection from physics. It arises because physics allows systems like you to exist at all. You still deliberate, you still struggle, you still reflect. These processes are not invalidated because they have causes. They are defined by having causes. Growth happens because experience reshapes future responses. Responsibility matters because actions leave traces. Regret exists because the system can update itself based on outcome. What disappears is not meaning but moral fantasy. The idea that you could have acted in complete isolation from everything that made you who you were in that moment. That idea was never realistic. It only felt comforting. This perspective also softens judgment. If actions emerge from complex histories rather than isolated moments of pure choice, then blame becomes less absolute. Understanding expands, accountability remains, but it is paired with curiosity instead of condemnation. You ask not only, what did you do, but how did this come to be? For you personally, this realization can be strangely relieving. You are not failing at control because control was never absolute to begin with. You are not broken because certainty slips through your fingers. You are a process constantly adjusting, learning, and responding. Perfection was never the goal. Adaptation was. The sense of self also changes. You are not a tiny commander issuing orders to a body. You are the entire system in motion. Thoughts, emotions, impulses, and actions are not enemies fighting for control. They are parts of a single unfolding process. When you stop demanding absolute authorship, coherence replaces conflict. Feynman's quiet gift here is humility without despair. You are not special because you escape the universe. You are special because you belong to it so completely that it can think through you. The same laws that govern stars and atoms allow reflection, doubt, and curiosity to arise locally inside a nervous system that can ask questions about itself. So what does this mean for you right now? It means you are not a passive victim of forces, and you are not a sovereign ruler standing above them. You are something far stranger, a lawful process that can understand its own limits. You still act, you still choose, in the only sense that ever mattered. Your actions flow from who you are, and who you are is shaped by what happens next. Meaning lives in that loop. Responsibility lives there too. The illusion of free will promised certainty. Letting it go does not remove meaning. It replaces false certainty with honest participation. You are not the author standing outside the story. You are the story, unfolding, lawful, uncertain, and real.